this afternoon. It happened near Beauverde and Chinguacousy just before 4 p.m. 3 men were shot. 2 of them are in life-threatening condition. One of the men was treated on the scene before being rushed to the hospital. The other went to a fire station near Huron, Ontario and Steeles and was then transported from there. Peel paramedics say the third victim walked to the hospital on his own. We will take you there live for an update in just a few minutes.
I'm begging now for the teachers' unions to work with us.
So there are still a lot of concerns about the safe reopening of schools.
Teachers ramp up their battle against the Ford government school reopening plan. The move comes as new concerns are raised over student safety, particularly when it comes to after-school care. The province's 4 largest teacher unions are filing a complaint with Ontario's Labour Board. They're alleging the government's school reopening plan violates its own workplace safety laws.
We have classrooms with not even a meter physical distancing between students or desks. We have school buses that are going to run at full capacity.
And that's the head of the Union for Elementary Teachers, Sam Hammond. He says union officials representing nearly 200,000 teachers met with the Ministry of Labour recently. They requested the ministry set standards on safety precautions such as physical distancing. But Hammond claims the ministry didn't respond in time. He wants the government to step up and deal with safety issues in schools. Last week, it was the Premier who said teacher unions need to step up. And today, Doug Ford renewed that call.
We've worked with every organization, every labor organization, every single group in the entire country at all different political stripes. And every single one, 99.9% of everyone's getting along, except there's one group. It's the teachers union. Why?
Ford also said today he regularly hears from teachers during his travels across Ontario, and he says many of them apologize for the way their unions are acting. The Premier says he can't understand why these unions aren't cooperating with the government, saying he's given them everything they have asked for. Another issue that has parents concerned, after-school care. In some cases, it will mean students being in close contact with a different group of kids than they were during the day, leading to more chances of exposure to COVID-19. Ali Chiasson is live tonight outside Clinton Junior Public School. Ali, some parents are worried about bursting those social bubbles they've worked so hard to keep.
That's right, Chris. So I think by now we've wrapped our minds around what a kid's school cohort would be. But what about the children who attend after-school programs where we see children mixing with kids from different grades and also different schools all together in one room? Doesn't that burst the bubble? Well, parents at least are thinking maybe we need to take another look at that.
I listen to the parents. I understand they're very anxious. I'm anxious.
Acknowledgement from the Premier today, back to school isn't going to be perfect.
I won't sit back and tell people, oh no, everything's going to be perfectly fine. There's going to be 2 million kids coming back into class with 160,000 teachers.
These days, there are more children under 19 than seniors getting COVID. So it's likely not if, it's when COVID gets into a classroom. The Minister of Education explained how they plan to minimize exposure.
We are maintaining cohorts, making sure that these children, the indirect, direct contact is under 100, which in BC, for example, that number is 120. We've taken a very cautious, very prudent approach.
Maintaining your child's cohort within their school community is one thing, but so many parents rely on after-school programs as well, which see kids bust in from other schools. Doesn't that burst their bubble?
With respect to before and after school programs, we're asking all of the names to be listed and centralized to make sure from contact management, contact tracing.
Asking names to be listed. The director of Treetop Children's Center says that language is too soft.
Although they say that we operators and school boards must make very best efforts to have cohorting in place, it's not a mandate or it's not a directive.
Treetop operates inside Oriole Park Junior Public School.
So in my situation, I'm very fortunate. I have a principal that will make every best effort to coordinate the children with me. However, a school up the street may have a different priority.
They don't want children to be sick. They don't want staff to get sick.
Politicians and public health doctors putting a lot of faith, critics would say burden, in the school boards and program directors in keeping on top of it.
We're all trying to accomplish the same goals in a way that allows, people to be able to go to work, children to be able to learn in school settings.
Now, I don't think anybody's really expecting zero risk here, because whether it's an after-school program, it could be soccer practice that inadvertently expands the bubble. Now, experts say this doesn't negate the purpose of school cohorts as long as safety protocols are followed in every setting, especially wearing masks and physical distancing. Send it back to you, Chris.
All right, thanks for this tonight, Ali. Meanwhile, a group of parents is calling on the province to mandate class sizes of 15 students or fewer.
I can't imagine the guilt I would feel if my child gave my mother, a cancer survivor, and my father, a 66-year-old with diabetes, a COVID-19 infection.
The group is called Ontario Safe. That stands for Safety Advocacy for Education. Their aim is to create awareness and push for safe and equitable conditions in Ontario schools. They've also released a YouTube video in support of their goal. Also speaking at today's press conference, a union representative for school bus drivers.
Without barriers on school buses, there needs to be a reduction of capacity. Without barriers, children should be masked in order to be transported and keep everyone safe. Again, we need help with this. We're asking our government to step up because we're not comforted by what we're hearing from transportation departments and consortia. Not at all.
Their movement seems to be picking up steam. The Ontario Safe petition calling for smaller class sizes has now garnered over 250,000 signatures. We're looking for parents, teachers, and students who can help us cover issues surrounding back to school this September. And we have a form on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto, where you can share your concerns. Tell us about school conditions and how classes are going. We're going to monitor the responses, follow up where we can, and take the issues you raise to the people in power. In Montreal, English-speaking students are back at school today, and we'll check in on how that went and maybe a few lessons for our return to class. That is all coming up a little later in the show. Now to an exclusive story. It was supposed to be the perfect home for Rod Wilson's 91-year-old father, a coach house in the backyard of a property that he owns. But a visit from a city inspector forced Wilson to remove his father. Turns out coach houses, also known as garden suites, are illegal. But as Farah Morelli tells us, in a city desperate for more rental housing, some are wondering why.
It's a space that Rod Wilson hoped his dad could call home.
He opened the door and he said, "This is yours." And I just took a look and just fell in love with it. It was just perfect.
This coach house is on the back of an East End property Wilson owns. He lives elsewhere. After his mother and sister passed 2 years ago, he moved his now 91-year-old father into here. But a complaint prompted a visit from the city, and Wilson was told his father had to go.
We have 23 letters of support from surrounding neighbors, and one of the gentlemen on the committee said, it wouldn't matter if you had the support of the whole city, it's still illegal.
While the city has moved to grant permits for laneway houses, that is, detached suites that back onto a laneway, it's yet to allow coach houses for residential use.
Windsor already allows it, Hamilton, Ottawa. They're way ahead of Toronto in this respect, and I hope we can catch up to them soon.
This urban planner says over time, options like coach houses could have an impact on rental stock, something that's badly needed in this city.
The problem in Toronto is not a shortage or that we have a surplus of rental housing. We need as much of it as we can get in as many forms and types as we can get all across the city.
The city's chief planner agrees.
I think it was a matter of time that this idea caught up to where people are at in the city of Toronto.
City Council passed a motion last month to look at different forms of new housing options.
The first priority actually is to look at garden suites or coach houses.
But it's unclear when or if it'll move to formally allow them. For Rod Wilson, there's little he can do until then. He's moved his father into the basement of the house on the property, something that involved evicting the longtime tenant.
The city is begging for housing, and here they are shutting us down.
Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
That story came from a tip, and remember, if you have a story you'd like us to look into, you can send us an email at torontotips@cbc.ca. Now to an ongoing police investigation. A statue of the Virgin Mary outside a Toronto church has been beheaded. Our Lady of Lebanon Church near Queen and Jameson says the vandalism to the statue was discovered Sunday morning just before Mass. They believe it happened overnight Saturday, and police are investigating the vandalism as mischief. The mayor tweeting today he was horrified to see what happened. Toronto police have put out these photos of the person they say is responsible. The suspect is about 6 feet tall, wearing a black T-shirt with white design, a thin red vest, beige shorts, and dark Birkenstock-style sandals. Anyone with information should contact police. Toronto police say several of their officers suffered injuries this weekend after an incident at a march in Little Jamaica. Several people captured the incident on cell phone video, criticizing the police response. It all comes at a time when police in this city are rolling out new body-worn cameras. And as Lorenda Redicop reports, some wonder whether they would have made a difference in this case.
He's one of the few officers from 23 Division already using a body cam on the job.
We're always on cameras with cell phones, which may not show the full picture, but having the body-worn camera provides both angles, as well as any misconduct by an officer.
In the end, I don't think it's going to solve everyone's problems. You know, we have a lot of challenges we're dealing with right now with systemic issues. No one denies that, and this is one piece of the puzzle.
No body cams were rolling on Saturday. A man was restrained while others held a rally for black businesses. He was reportedly tasered by officers after jumping on and damaging someone's car. Another man also got involved.
I think the officers acted accordingly. I mean, we had 7 of our officers that were injured.
Police say that's the type of incident that would be recorded. Only in cases of privacy should a camera not be turned on. And all footage would have to be turned over to investigators. But the public may not see it due to privacy issues.
It's for court purposes, investigative purposes, but we're also exploring the ability, when it's exigent or really necessary, that we would be able to release some of that.
When I press this button here, it starts recording. There's also a 30-second buffer. Those 30 seconds before I start recording, though, they don't have any audio.
If an officer doesn't push that button when they should, their pay will be docked. The lawyer for the family of Regis Korchinski-Paquette, who died falling from a balcony while police were in her apartment, sees the cameras as important.
And it speaks to the climate because there is a serious mistrust of the police. We've known over decades the police have told false truths regarding interactions with people, especially people of the African descent and Indigenous descent.
We did not ask our police board to capture this violence against us on camera. We asked them to stop doing the violence in the first place. These cameras do not stop violence.
By next fall, more than 2,000 officers will have body cams. Meanwhile, the Special Investigations Unit is looking for more video from the public of what happened on Saturday. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to Ottawa, where today the federal government announced agreements with 2 U.S. drug companies trying to develop COVID-19 vaccines. As Evan Dyer reports, it means the government potentially will have tens of millions of doses on reserve.
So today we saw the second stage of Canada's plan to buy vaccine doses in advance of their actual development, of course, because there is as yet no COVID vaccine, but many drug makers around the world, universities, governments, all working on various different possible vaccines.
The Government of Canada has signed 2 new agreements with Novavax and Johnson & Johnson to reserve millions of doses of the vaccines they're developing.
drug company Johnson & Johnson and its division of Janssen Pharmaceuticals, which produced the Ebola vaccine, will use the same technology that it used for that vaccine, in fact, to develop a COVID vaccine. It's already quite far along. It was scheduled to begin phase 2 trials this coming month of September, but actually jumped ahead of schedule, has already concluded phase 2, and will now begin phase 3 in September. The other company that Canada announced the deal with today is Novavax, which has much less of a track record, but which does appear to have a promising vaccine. The U.S. government has also signed about a $2 billion contract with Novavax, a Maryland-based company. It's in stage 2 trials, which it began last week, so a little further back in that approvals process.
Taken together, our vaccine agreements with Pfizer, Moderna, Novavax, and Johnson & Johnson will give Canada at least 88 million doses, with options to attain tens of millions more.
And we also did hear something else of significance today, I thought, from Health Minister Patty Hajdu, who finally did answer a question that's been asked of the Prime Minister several times, but we haven't heard a conclusive answer yet as to whether this vaccine would be mandatory.
Let's be clear, no vaccines are mandatory, federally mandated to be used in Canada, and COVID-19 vaccine would be no different.
Although she did mention cases where the government stops short of legally mandating the taking of vaccines, but can impose other penalties, for example, not allowing children to attend school unless they've been vaccinated. So stopping short of forcing people to take it if they don't want to, but perhaps leaving the door open for some measures to try to persuade people to take that COVID vaccine if and when it becomes ready. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Chelsea, Quebec.
Time now for a first look at your weather forecast, and a beauty day today, Colette Kennedy, but I gotta say, it was pretty windy.
Yeah, it was breezy, but I think that's part of the reason folks enjoyed it, because that breeze, Chris, was coming off the lake. So it's what kept things kind of comfortable. The temperature's down a little bit and the humidity down as well. But you can really see the story here when we look at the temperatures around Lake Ontario. So Markham, 21, Oshawa, 22, and you see that for Toronto, Mississauga, and Hamilton. But have a look at St. Catharines, and this is really the story at 28, and it's because of the wind direction. It was from the east-southeast, just enough that it was more of a land breeze for St. Catharines. It wasn't getting the benefit of the lake, not even from Lake Erie, and so that's why the temperature shot up a little bit further there. Now, a look at those winds at the moment. You can see still that kind of direction there for St. Catharines. It's still getting, it's more easterly now for the city, and Hamilton's kind of switched around towards the north. But the winds aren't terribly strong now. They're starting to back off a little bit from the stronger breeze that we had earlier. We are looking at dry conditions. Now, we could have a stray, really isolated shower this evening, mostly towards the east. But this is the next system we need to watch. That's the one that's going to be coming in tomorrow. Now, this will be more late day tomorrow, having an impact on us. When that comes through, yes, we're going to see showers and thunderstorms, more humidity coming at us too. I'll talk more about that coming up, Chris, but for tonight, 18, there it is tomorrow. Changes coming in the forecast for sure.
All right, so I should have thanked the wind instead of cursing it so much. That's what you're telling me.
That's right, it gave you the comfort today.
All right, thanks, Colette.
You got it.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
The rent subsidy program that came into effect to address the pandemic expires today. And the federal government did not announce an extension, but it is extending the deadline for the Canada Emergency Business Account. It's a program that provides interest-free loans to small businesses during the pandemic.
Today, we are announcing that the CEBA application deadline will be extended to October 31st, 2020. This gives businesses 2 extra months to apply for a CEBA loan to help them get through this difficult time and ultimately to emerge stronger.
Meanwhile, the Ontario government announced a $9.3 million investment in the auto sector today, meant to help workers adapt to new roles created as a result of the pandemic.
With today's announcement, more than 2,000 people will have the opportunity to train for rewarding careers and become part of Ontario's dynamic manufacturing future.
These funds will go towards 11 training projects in manufacturing, industry associations, and at colleges and universities. The province says the projects will help train students and retrain laid-off workers. It's all meant to help with Ontario's recovery efforts. Now to finances a little closer to home, and new data shows during the pandemic, people are investing more in their properties. Philip Lee Shannock now with the revving renovation industry.
Along with redoing kitchens, bathrooms, and basements, this contractor has become really good at juggling. He's got 3 jobs on the go and a lot of interested homeowners.
It was just an influx of calls, emails, just inundated with things to do right in and around the house.
It seems with so many out of work, one bright spot is that those who are still bringing in a paycheck are spending it on their homes.
They're trying to create that home office, that utilize that space in the basement, and even just the bathroom, right? Using it constantly, the kids running in and out. A lot of people are taking the time now to do refinancing and things like that, just so they can make their home as comfortable as possible.
From professional contractors to do-it-yourselfers, stores are reporting that traffic is building, and that could lay a firm foundation for an economic recovery.
You are looking at about $3.5 billion in sales in the month of June. That's not only higher than it was in May, but it's actually higher than it was in June last year. So you've actually seen growth over the comparable month in the pre-COVID period.
The unexpected reno boom caught the lumber industry by surprise.
There have actually been some shortages that have popped up periodically. So, for example, there's been trouble sourcing pressure-treated wood. There's been trouble with respect to, getting cedar.
While they work to fix supply chain issues, home improvement stores are reporting better bottom lines. Lowe's reported sales were up by more than 20%. Home Depot's were up by 25%. Many stores are looking to hire, and so is Daily.
Bringing on someone who can manage a site and be able to oversee certain things while we're taking care of our other projects, because it could only be in one place at a time.
And economists expect the trend to be sustainable, helped by low interest rates and Canadians working from home for the rest of the year and beyond. Philip Lee Shannock, CBC News, Pickering.
Lots of renos could also mean lots of injuries at home. So how has learning first aid changed during the pandemic? That story is next.
It's not going to look pretty. It's not going to look like super real life, but it's going to get the job done. Objective is going to be met.
We're asking if you have something, a tissue, piece of paper towel, any type of cloth, just cover their face
The city recognized lives lost due to overdoses today at a flag-raising ceremony for International Overdose Awareness Day. And we met a mother who lost her son to an overdose.
We're fighting for advocacy for those that are living today, and just to prevent one more mother, one more family, brother, sister, going through the grief and anguish and devastation that I've been through.
Irene Patterson held a picture of her son, Roger, who died from a fentanyl overdose. The mayor spoke at the flag raising about the importance of reducing the stigma around substance abuse and his continued support of expanding programs that provide a safer supply of drugs. Last month alone, 27 people died due to suspected opioid overdoses, and that is the worst month on record since the city started keeping track in 2017.
Need to rally the government for more funding for safe supply programs. So there's no more deaths. You know, this is worse than the COVID pandemic. This is a pandemic.
And then this afternoon, advocates gathered in Allen Gardens downtown also to remember the lives lost to overdoses. Stepping in to try and save someone's life is stressful enough, never mind during a pandemic. First aid training courses are starting up again, but as Susanna De Silva explains, COVID-19 has changed how those classes look and what is being taught.
So that's the pool noodle arm.
Pool noodles with a new, potentially life-saving job.
We have a low joint, so there's an elbow.
Called into service to help train people in first aid with classroom partners no longer allowed and training groups unable to afford more full-body mannequins.
It's not going to look pretty, it's not going to look like super real life, but it's going to get the job done. Objective is going to be met.
Classes now also have fewer students, online components, and in the COVID world, even some of the basic ABCs have changed.
So instead of using all your senses, we're probably now have to just rely more on our visual senses, right? So do we see that chest up and moving up and down?
Mouth to mouth on a stranger isn't recommended, but even with chest compressions only, there are new concerns and different approaches.
We're asking if you have something, a tissue, piece of paper towel, any type of cloth, just cover their face. There are some recent studies that might suggest there is limited respiratory vapor.
But St. John Ambulance's team of medical experts decided not to recommend that.
We felt it would be a detriment to the recovery of the casualty, right? If they are, starting to breathe on their own, or if they are gasping, the extra barrier between them and the air is not healthy for their recovery.
Some of these students are upgrading their skills to be first aid attendants at their workplaces, happy to be getting their training with COVID in mind.
That will probably sort of put any sort of fears that I might have, allay those to one side, so that I felt a bit more proactive if a situation did arise out on the street.
And experts say employers need to make sure those designated at work to administer first aid review updated guidelines, and in BC, for example, meet new requirements for additional PPE in first aid kits. But whatever the situation, first aid groups say at the very least, call 911.
If it was you, you would hope somebody would help you to do that. So please, at least do something for them.
So this patient... Keeping in mind the safety of the person trying to help comes first. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
When we come back, the latest on breaking news in Brampton. 3 men have been shot, 2 of them in critical condition, and we will take you live to the scene. That's coming up next. Welcome back. Montreal's English School Board welcomed tens of thousands of students back into the classroom today. The board says it's following all COVID-19 health guidelines introduced by the province, but with a handful of French language schools reporting cases after opening last week, there is uncertainty and concern among many parents. Simon Nakaneshny has more.
While the ice has been broken, kids are inside and outside this school in Montreal's Plateau neighborhood. And in many ways, it feels like a back to school like any other, in the sense that kids are smiling, finding their friends again, sometimes for the first time in months. Other kids are nervous because they're starting at a new school and wondering about making new friends. But then, of course, when you take a step back from all those familiar sights and sounds, you realize this is not a back to school like any other. It's all against the backdrop of a deadly global pandemic. Now, school is mandatory for all kids in Quebec unless they have a medical exemption. So for many kids and parents, today is diving into the deep end, whether they wanted to or not.
I'm a bit nervous about going with COVID and stuff, but I feel like they have good precautions.
I see you wearing your mask. What are you gonna wear that all day?
No.
What does it feel like wearing a mask?
Soft. It's kind of weird, actually. Everybody's wearing masks, so yeah, I'm not used to this.
We're happy for her to be able to kind of go back to school and have a little more normalcy and some of those social interactions and educational opportunities again. And so, I mean, if things need to close down for a while again, we'll understand.
And with the uncertainty comes a whole new set of challenges. Mask wearing is mandatory for kids grade 5 and up, but not while in the classroom. There have also been concerns about class sizes remaining the same, but Quebec is dealing with a teacher shortage, so that will be a longer-term problem to fix. Another long-term problem, ventilation. Many schools in the province are aging and need to have their systems upgraded. Then there's the issue of what happens if there's an outbreak. There have been cases in a handful of schools in the province as the French system started classes last week. If there is an outbreak, a class or even a school could shut down temporarily. It's a lot of uncertainty for everyone.
I suppose we're anticipating all different kind of questions, sure. I mean, we have to demystify all the stuff that the kids hear and give them the facts as they are at their developmental level, and support them and be optimistic and teach them how to be resilient.
So for thousands today, this is a plunge into the unknown and something that will be watched very carefully in the province and beyond. Simon Nakaneshny, CBC News, Montreal.
The COVID-19 pandemic has provided months of leisure for some kids in Canada, but for lots of parents, it's been tough. With the new school year around the corner, Peter Armstrong looks at how families are coping and how some entrepreneurs are helping children face a world that now requires masks.
Spring! It's a pretty idyllic summer at the Martin household.
We've actually really just settled into such a nice groove.
The kids will tell you summer technically started during March break, but they know this isn't going to last. Their first day at school now lurks just around the corner.
So feeling good. I'm excited to see my friends. I'm nervous.
Mom's nervous too, and all the usual anxieties of getting the kids ready for back to school is now compounded by the weird new realities of a pandemic.
With all the back to school stuff, there were masks, sanitizers, face shields, and kid versions of all of those. And it's almost a little sad, to see how these kids, it's not normal.
These ones here are back to school masks for kids.
Marcus Fraser usually makes high-end clothing for retailers across the country. Now he's pivoted his entire business, fabricating surgical gowns and masks.
Just fun little rainbows, clouds, pizza. What kid doesn't love pizza?
Fraser's own kids don't like masks much, so he tried to find a way to make them more fun.
We recognized early that, kids are going to be a big issue here. We made it fun for our kids, starting with an emoji collection, and it got so much attention, so we just started spinning it off into prints.
Every little thing that can lighten kids' moods adds up. Doctors say social distancing and masks work, but remember, kids' anxiety levels matter too.
Let's keep talking about it and recognizing that this is
uncharted territory for all of us. And I think it's okay as parents for us to also be honest about the fact that this is causing a lot of us anxiety.
That notion resonates in Martin's backyard. They're telling the kids what's happening with the pandemic and why school will be different, and just trying to be honest about the risks.
I don't need to wear a mask, but my mom wants me to be safe.
But right now, they're trying to make the most of these final days together this summer.
I feel like the days are kind of numbered before we go back to school now, and I'm just trying to soak it all up with the kids.
Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
To sports now, and the Raptors will have their resilience tested tomorrow when they tip off for Game 2 against the Celtics. The Raps losing the opener of the second round series 112-94. Today, the team was talking about the loss and how they plan to regroup. Greg Ross has more.
We've certainly been punched squarely in the nose.
Williams in for Tyson, a slam dunk in Boston. Back up by 22.
Raptors head coach Nick Nurse admits his team did not play well in Game 1 against the Celtics. It's the first time since entering the NBA bubble that the Raptors have faced any kind of real adversity, and Nurse said it showed in the players' demeanor at practice today.
We're a little pissed off, and we should be. I mean, we're not proud of anything we did yesterday. I'd much rather be holding hands and skipping rope after a win, you know what I mean? But again, this is where we find ourselves.
Nurse will somehow have to use that frustration as motivation for Game 2 tomorrow, something the team has been very successful with since Nurse took over as head coach last season.
Step through, shot good.
After falling down 0-2 against the Milwaukee Bucks last year in the conference final, the Raptors stormed back to win 4 straight, advancing to the NBA final.
I think that's just when you draw your experience a little bit. I mean, we've all been in these positions. We've been on the good side. We've been on the bad side. We understand the ups and downs that come with the playoffs.
One bad game doesn't seem to have dampened the spirits of fans either.
They won a championship last year. I think they have the confidence to do it.
They got a lot of grit, and I expect them to come back and play hard.
Some players on the Raptors are going to be getting a little extra incentive before Game 2, and that's because they're going to be reunited with family members who they haven't seen in person in more than 2 months. After quarantining off-site for the past couple of weeks, the NBA is going to be permitting some family members and close friends to enter the bubble.
I'm just excited. Just excited. I miss my family. You know, family is huge for me, so it's been a while. I think the last time I saw him was Father's Day. You know, right on time after getting our butts kicked yesterday. So that'll kind of take my mind off of it for a little bit today.
Game 2 goes tomorrow evening at 5:30. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
So a bit of a stumble there for the Raps, and I think the weather is about to have a bit of a stumble too, right, Colette?
Yeah, it's going to change a little bit, that's right. So for those who really enjoyed today, the feel is going to be very different as the humidity's coming back, but it's not there right now, and the temperatures too. Just, you know, I got to step back and have a look at this national perspective. Even if you just look at the color contours, the greens and the yellows here right across the country, and even into the U.S., the northern plains, it's all yellows and greens here into the Rockies as well. It's the last day of August. It's starting to feel a little more fall-like. And if you're looking for the warmth in Canada, where is it? Hey, it's over towards us in southern Ontario, the lower Great Lakes. That's the best we can do here with some of these 20s, upper 20s for St. Catharines, because that flow hasn't really been off the lake there, as I was mentioning earlier. And there's a little bit of humidity there. And low 30s, that's the kind of humidex we're going to have here into Toronto for tomorrow. So yeah, those values will be going up. And it's because this system, as it's pushing towards us, it's going to move those winds. Instead of being from the east-southeast like they were through much of the day today, they're going to turn towards the southwest. It's going to bring some of that humidity in, but also the clouds will be increasing. We're going to find kind of through the day tomorrow sort of a mix of sun and cloud as this is pushing towards us. And then late day, the scenario is going to be we'll start to see some showers developing and thunderstorms into cottage country, southwestern Ontario, and then it'll be into the later evening. We'll see that development coming towards the GTA, and certainly overnight, some heavier rain with some embedded thunderstorms, and into Wednesday morning we'll see some of that heavier rain too. By the afternoon and evening it'll start to clear back out again, and that'll be a nicer setup for Wednesday late day and into Thursday. But humid through that period until we see some drier air coming towards the end of the week, Thursday into Friday. Overnight tonight, your temperatures look like this, so kind of upper teens for us. That's above seasonal. Seasonal low at this time of year, about 12 degrees. And you see an average high at this time of year is around 24. So today we were close to seasonal. Tomorrow we're not. We're going back up. And like I said, the humidex values are going to be kind of in those low 30s. Some wet conditions, some embedded thunderstorms into Wednesday. Thursday feeling a little more comfortable and more comfortable with the temperatures, Chris, as we go into Friday.
Thanks, Colette. Let's go to that breaking news out of Brampton. 3 men have been shot. 2 of them are in life-threatening condition. And Kelda Yoon is live at the scene for us at Beauverde and Chinguacousy. Kelda, what's the latest?
Well, Chris, Peel Police just gave an update just moments ago. They're now in the early investigation, part of their investigation, investigating now what is now a triple shooting. I'm here outside Brampton Cemetery and Funeral Home at Beauverde and Chinguacousy. As you can see, there is a large portion of the cemetery has been taped off. This entrance has been blocked off, as has all the entrances to the cemetery. This is where it's believed the shooting took place. Police got multiple calls about shots being fired at around 3:44. And when they arrived, they found a man with gunshot wounds. He was rushed to the hospital, and he is in a life-threatening condition. But this is not the only scene. About 10 minutes after that, police got a call about a man that had walked up to, that had been dropped off at a fire station not far from here. And he is also found to have been shot, and he's also in life-threatening condition. And then shortly after that, police say a man walked into Brampton Civic Hospital, also suffering from injuries. The extent of those injuries are not known, but police say that he is in stable condition. So a lot of questions remain. Police say they are investigating, trying to talk to witnesses. Here's what police said in their update earlier.
3:44 this afternoon, we received a call for shots fired. The gist of the call was that there were upwards of 6 to 7 individuals that were shooting at each other. That took place here behind me in the cemetery.
So police say that they do have a suspect vehicle. They also said they're holding 4 vehicles inside the cemetery. 2 of them have bullet holes. As you heard when the calls came in, it was reported that it was 6 to 7 people who were shooting at each other. Police say that it's not known whether it's gang related at this point, but I will have more at 11 o'clock tonight with the latest. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, certainly a very dynamic scene, and you can stay with us on CBC Toronto. We will take you back to the scene if we have another update, but for now, thanks, Kelda. When we come back, history is made in the Middle East. And that's a plane from Israel just moments after touching down in the United Arab Emirates. It was the first ever direct commercial passenger flight between the 2 countries. More on that historic moment after the break. Welcome back. In U.S. politics, Democratic hopeful Joe Biden took on a new, more aggressive tone today during a campaign stop in Pennsylvania. He launched a scathing attack on Donald Trump, blaming the president for the growing civil unrest across the U.S. and for the type of violence that left one person dead during protests in Portland over the weekend. Nick Harper has more.
Well, Joe Biden argues that President Trump is using the violence as what he calls a political lifeline to win him re-election in November.
Fires are burning and we have a president who fans the flames rather than fighting the flames.
He also said that he was stoking that violence that we've seen recently across the United States. In the course of the last week, there have been violent clashes in Kenosha, Wisconsin and Portland, Oregon, sometimes between Trump supporters and anti-racism protesters. And during the course of several nights of violence, we have seen 3 men lose their lives.
He may believe mouthing the words law and order makes him strong, but his failure to call on his own supporters to stop acting as an armed militia in this country shows how weak he is.
He said that Donald Trump had failed to protect America from COVID-19. He said the president's response and handling of that crisis was inadequate, and he was therefore using the violence to, he said, scare Americans. He said essentially that this was a distraction tactic, distracting everybody away from COVID-19 and the failing economy, and instead focusing on this violence. And therefore, Joe Biden said that the president was rooting for chaos and violence. Of course, the president feels very differently. He says that this violence has just been taking place in Democrat-run cities. He even tweeted earlier in the day saying that Portland was a mess. And he said that if this joke of a mayor, referring to the Democrat mayor in Portland, doesn't clean it up, we'll go in and do it for them. Now, that argument, of course, goes very much against Joe Biden's argument, but it does, I perhaps suggest, show that we are beginning to see a very toxic run-up to this election in which we're seeing violence and race as very central issues for the election. Nick Harper, CBC News, Washington.
For the first time ever, a commercial aircraft made a direct flight between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Iris Mackler has the details from Jerusalem.
Another step towards regional peace.
It was a first. Israeli airline El Al calling passengers on flight 971 to the United Arab Emirates. Another first. Saudi Arabia gave permission for an Israeli plane to overfly its airspace, cutting the flight time in half. US Middle East envoy Jared Kushner told the UAE leaders he'd asked the pilot to fly faster because it was urgent to break down barriers and to form new friendships. He referred to the people who were not taking any part in this process, the Palestinians.
The message that we carry for the Palestinians is also one of hope. When they are ready, the whole region is very excited to help lift them up and move them forward, but they can't be stuck in the past. They have to come to the table.
The negotiators will spend 2 days in Abu Dhabi to nail down the details of the newly opened diplomatic relations. Kushner indicated Washington would also discuss the sale of American F-35 fighter jets, something the UAE has wanted for years. The Trump administration hopes to have the deal signed in Washington by October, a foreign policy win just in time for the US elections in November. Iris Mackler, CBC News, Jerusalem.
When we come back, we look to the skies in Toronto. The story behind this rooftop mural is next. Yorkville Murals is a project celebrating public art and its ability to brighten and beautify neighborhoods. This weekend, artists took their skills to the area for a huge installation.
You're essentially observing this urban jungle. In the middle of it, there's this giant, colorful seahorse. And for me, that's such a sign of hope. We decided to basically create Toronto's largest mural. And the place that we decided to use as our canvas is a parking lot, which is a very unexpected space to use for art, right? And I think that that's a little bit what makes it very exciting. When you go on top of the parking lot, you see this explosion of color. And so it's very hard to see the image of what it is. And then there's the aspect of surprise that when you realize that all these shapes is actually like a giant seahorse that was created by the local artist, Berto. You look at places that most people tend to sort of overlook and see their potential and create something really special and beautiful in them. And I think like the more that we start thinking like that, our neighborhoods are going to become more interesting. I feel that now more than ever, this is something that is really important. So like I wanted to make a point this year to keep building the project even during COVID, because I think that even when things slow down, I have to keep pushing. I have to keep pushing so that this agenda of public art can continue to grow.
What a cool design. I was trying to figure out what it was, but a seahorse, Colette.
I love that. I love seahorses. I don't know how they keep the perspective as they are making that, though, and anything to make a parking lot more beautiful, right? Overnight tonight, 18 degrees, partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow, increasing cloudiness, 27. The humidity going up. It's going to feel like 33, and then it is going to be late day tomorrow. So think more late afternoon into really the evening when we're going to start to see showers and thunderstorms developing. We'll have those then overnight as we go Tuesday and into Wednesday morning. So that's when we really get into some of these wet conditions as that system approaches, Chris.
All right, thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
And that is our show for tonight. Tune in at 11 for the very latest on that triple shooting out of Brampton. But that's it for us tonight. Have a great night.